Hello and welcome to today's episode, which is going to be another gluten-free seitan, this time with lots of textures. I'll put a link down in the description of the two other gluten-free seitans that I've done. I've still got lots of the ingredients left over from making the first one especially, so I thought it'd be interesting to try and use those in different ways. Also, the first gluten-free seitan that I did performs really well. In YouTube analytics, I can see the top 3 videos that are watched in a 48-hour period, and that one's usually second or third on the list. I think people are into gluten-free products, so why not, exploit that a little bit. My plan is to make the seitan in this bread tin. I'm going to mix up a wet batter from various ingredients, and then I've got these dried bean curd sheets. So this is Yuba. I'm not sure how to pronounce it 100%. Let me know in the comments if you know. But these are dried. Then I've got some brown rice noodles, the kind of like the vermicelli type noodles. And then I've got rice paper as well. I'm going to create lots of textures inside there, and the moisture from the batter will hydrate the dry things and dry out the batter. So hopefully it's going to work and not just be a big gooey mess. But we won't know unless we try. I'm going to preheat my oven. It's a fan oven. I'm doing it at 160C, which is about 325 Fahrenheit. I'll do you a close-up of the ingredients very quickly, just so you know what I'm going to use. The main substrate is going to be this teff flour. If I can find any more information about it, I'll stick it down in the description for you. Soy protein isolate. I just picked this up in the health and wellbeing aisle in the supermarket. It's a bodybuilding supplement. I've got some psyllium husk. You can use this if you've got a bad stomach and things are a bit liquid, and it kind of binds everything together. I'm going to use some chickpeas. Then in terms of flavour, I've got mixed herbs, that's things like thyme, marjoram, oregano, that kind of thing. Onion granules, garlic granules, tomato puree, MSG, monosodium glutamate, white pepper, and I need to grab some salt as well. I think I'm going to mash the chickpeas down roughly. I think I'll leave the liquid in there, the aquafaba. That has properties in and of itself because there's lots of starches in there. So I'm just going to dump the whole lot in. When it comes to chickpeas, typically the cheaper they are, the smaller they are. For this kind of thing, because I'm going to kind of harness the skins in there as a bit of texture, go for cheap ones and then they're quite small. Go in and mash these through. So if you can see, the aquafaba's kind of gloopy. So I think that's going to be quite a good property in here. So that's broken down. So these are the little skins that are on the chickpeas. So I'm hoping that's going to add a bit of texture as well. So I think I'm going to add in all of my flavour components because then it's easier to get those mixed through consistently. 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of beef flavour stock, 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper, 1/4 teaspoon of MSG. This is just a really nice quick way of getting lots of umami flavours in there. I'm going to do a teaspoon of shiitake mushroom powder. This is just dried shiitake mushrooms that I've grated down. 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, a teaspoon of onion granules, and a tablespoon of the mixed herbs. And I'm going to blob in some tomato puree, probably like a tablespoon. I think I might need to open another tube. Just going to show you this just in case you don't know. The tip of a tomato puree tube is a spike, and you use that to open tubes. So you put it in, and that opens your tube. So it's maybe a heaped tablespoon of tomato puree. Stir this together. Time to start adding the other bits. I'm going to do a tablespoon of the psyllium husk. If you haven't got the psyllium, you could probably use ground flax seeds, ground chia seeds, that kind of thing. I'm just going to whisk this in, then I'll add the other bits as well. Again, just to get this consistent, because this is going to really hydrate. It'll become kind of snotty, which is an awesome description when you're cooking. That's just what you want to hear. I'm going to do maybe 4 tablespoons of the soy protein. I might stir this through. I'm going to switch to a spatula, I think. Because this is a test, I'm keeping the flavourings fairly basic. If it works, next batch I can do things like beetroot powder for colour. I don't want it to fail and then have wasted a load of ingredients. And then add the teff. I think I'll do 4 tablespoons to start with. Mix that in. It's a crumbly kind of stage. So now I'm going to add enough water for that to become like a loose batter. Do it by tablespoons and then you know how much I'm using. Start with 4, I think. So this is where the balancing act comes into play, because I need it wet enough to hydrate the dry things, but not too wet that it just doesn't, form a solid mass. I'm going to do another final 2, I think. Just want it a little bit looser. These are the brown rice noodles that I'm going to use. I'm just going to cut through that to get them into straight pieces. It's going to go everywhere. And that will hopefully leave us with bits that are kind of long and straight. And then with the rice wrappers, I'm going to cut them in half. These haven't been soaked or anything. And then I'll cut them into strips. And then I'm just going to grab some of the bean curd sheets. I used these the other day to make some vegan bacon. It worked really well. It goes nice and super crisp. I'll stick the link to that recipe in the description. So this is a nice way of using all the broken bits of the Yuba from the bag. I'm just going to spray oil in the tin and wipe it around with some paper towel. I'm going to blob a thin layer of the batter at the bottom. So I'm just, that's the problem with oiling it, now everything moves. Because I'm thinking I want to encapsulate all of the other ingredients in the batter. So if I put a layer at the bottom and a layer at the top, and then just make sure there's plenty at the sides as well. And then it should hold together into a brick of deliciousness. Sprinkle in some of the Yuba. And I think I might kind of poke that in a little bit and do another layer on top of that. Sprinkle in some of the noodles. More goo. I'm going to put a few of these wrapper strips. Maybe I should have done a bit more mixture. I find it tricky to estimate volume sometimes, but that's okay. We'll know for next time. I guess what you could also do is put the dry ingredients into the batter and then dump it all in that way. I might do that on the last layer. The bits that I'm adding into it are just to give a bit of variance in texture, because seitan has one consistent texture, which is fine, but can be a bit boring. So let's try and get some other bits and pieces going on while we're at it. Yeah, I'd say maybe double all of the other ingredients. Maybe not the chickpeas, but everything else. And then that'll give you a good amount of stuff to work with. So I've got that much left of the goo. So I think I'm just going to put things directly into here and see if that works. And then mix that all together. And then flatten this out. At this stage, mixing it all together looks like it's worked okay. That's everything in the tin. I'm just trying to get it somewhat flat, because then it's going to go in the oven and then I'm going to flip it over after 40 minutes. So that's everything in a nice even layer. I've got another strip of foil here. I'm just going to oil that. So I think I'm going to try and get it kind of snug. And now I'm going to bring up the sides of the inner one and then kind of crimp them together, I think. And then slide this into the oven. That's on the middle shelf of the oven. I'm going to put that on for 45 minutes, and then once that's finished, I'll take it out of the tin, attempt to take it out of the tin at least, flip it over, probably put it on a baking tray or something, and then put it on for another 45 minutes. I'm now going to roll straight into making like a breakfast cake type pastry sort of thing. I'm using chorizo and phyllo pastry. Keep an eye out for that one if it works. It's been around 4 hours. The seitan's cooler than it was when I took it out of the oven. Ideally it would be cold, but I really want to wrap this up and take my makeup off and just chill out for the night. And I don't want to put hot things in the fridge. So it's cool enough to not cause massive problems. So let's have a peek in the foil. Ooh, okay. It feels nice and firm. That's good. So it's gone very concave on the bottom of it. It's a rather odd shape, but that's fine. I'm going to use a serrated blade. Here's the inside of it. Texture's very open. If you're wondering how the breakfast phyllo thing went, I will slot a piece of video in for you, because my goodness, it's stunning. Let's chomp. Flavour's pretty good. Bit soft in places. Because I had the phyllo thing in there, I needed to crank the heat up to 180, which is why I've got such a sort of thick crust on the outside. But I remember when I did the tofu gluten-free seitan, overnight the kind of crust softened up quite well overnight. So I think that'll be fine. Yeah, so I think 160, maybe increase the cooking time to 2 hours, 2.5 hours maybe. I did 1.5 hours. Flavours are nice though, and the textures, there are some interesting little textures going on in there. It does fall apart a bit where like especially around the Ubers sheets. I'm wondering if the mixture's perhaps a touch too wet. The problem is if you make it thicker, like put less water in, it's then going to be quite difficult to mix the other texture items in. Maybe do a few less tablespoons of water so it's much thicker, and mix all of the dry bits. Once you've got it into a smooth dough, it is a payoff between getting it loose enough to work the dry stuff in there, but then dry enough that it's not soft. It's fine, it tastes good, but it's more like a thick pate. It's that kind of texture, but you know, the flavour's awesome. So this is the layer that's on top, which is the last bit where I mixed everything in together, and that hasn't got any of the separation that, for example, down here has. The other two recipes that I've done were other people's recipes, and I kind of changed some of the ingredients, whereas this one I've done completely from scratch. On one of those seitans, the author had said it's taken me several attempts to get it to this consistency, so I think it is going to be one of those that just needs constant refining and updating and trying different things with it. I think as a first attempt from scratch, not bad at all. I'm gonna say many thanks and much love to my patrons. Your support gives me lots of warm fuzzy feelings and food in the fridge, which is definitely a bonus. If you want to join, I'll leave a link down in the description for you. There's some behind the scenes things. You get polled on seeing which episode you want to see next. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to see more plant-based and sometimes gluten-free ingredients being thrown together in a bowl and then boshed in the oven. While you're waiting for the next one, have a look at this.